Hello, welcome back to TSC Talks, the podcast inspired by the condition known as tuberous sclerosis complex. My name's Jill Woodworth, and I am your host. Thanks so much for tuning in once again. We are back on the medical cannabis subject. However, we're going to lighten it up a little bit with this episode. The Canna Mom Show hosts Joyce and Amie are here to talk to you about their podcast, their vision for the cannabis industry locally, and their own experience with cannabis and what they're doing with this podcast, which is inspiring cannabis stories told by real cannabis moms. This is the show for you, former family law attorney and mother of two, Joyce Gerber, and her Canna sister, Amie Searles, a 420 realtor. Talk with women from coast to coast who are leaders in the revolution of cannabis and caregiving and crushing the cannabis stigma, one canna story at a time. So inspired and great to meet these ladies. I want to make the connection with the TSC community. I do know personally using cannabis actually helped with some very deep processing and kind of slowed the framework down long enough so I could take a pause and see how my own behavior was kind of interacting with the very challenging TSC TAND-related behavior with my kids and kind of step out of the circles of repetitive behavior and acting out trauma loops and whatnot, and really kind of understand what needed to be done to not only help my kids, but heal personally. So it's been a huge tool for me. It's not a cure-all, as I've mentioned in other podcasts. I'm not a doctor, but I do think it holds a lot of hope. And I think we need to talk about it more and find ways that we can help ourselves be less dependent on millions of pharmaceuticals and our children. And these ladies make it fun to talk about. They're both very real, share their struggles, talk about sharing cannabis use with their children and how the kids that have grown up in, or kids, young adults, whoever have grown up in, since reefer madness was not drilled into their heads, how much easier it is for them to accept their parents' cannabis use to the point where they're like, yeah, know that, mom, move it along. Anyways, great episode, as they all are. We have plenty more on the way. We've got Dr. Ben Kaplan with the Seed Foundation out of Boston talking about educating more doctors, as well as a lot of resources. Marissa Frattoni, who is a cannabis nurse local to Massachusetts, also is on the docket. John Workman, who is a real visionary in the hemp industry, is coming up. More and more and more. So we're going to get these podcasts out to you. Hope we can help you in some way. And we have a market research survey out there kind of asking for your feedback on some of this subject content matter that we're developing. So keep tuning in and take it away, the Canna Mom Show. Thanks, Joyce and Amie.
Joyce and Amie, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I think I connected with you, Joyce, on LinkedIn and saw that you were a podcaster doing a cannabis podcast in Massachusetts, and I was like, yay. So
yay.
Yeah. So why don't you guys just each take a turn and kind of tell me a little bit about yourselves and how you know, your history kind of leading up to starting the podcast.
Okay, great. So the Joyce, I'll go first.
Okay.
So I always say my story is a little different than the women who tend to get into this, I've noticed just from doing all these interviews. So those stories tend to be someone with an illness, as you've probably observed, or a child with an illness, like you've observed, and then they go down that medication route.
Yep.
And then they discover cannabis, right, on their own, and then seem to be using it, you know, themselves as guinea pigs, which is not my story in any way, shape, or form.
Good. I like to hear a range, you know.
Yes. So my story is really, I'm a lawyer. My son is going to be 21 next week.
Congratulations.
And, thank you. My greatest accomplishment is that he was with me during law school pregnant, and that
my goodness.
I took the bar pregnant and passed the first time. I proved that a woman's uterus and brain can work simultaneously. Yeah. Then when I actually had the baby and passed the bar, then that whole juggling profession mom thing really, wow, that was hard.
Yeah.
So I had Josh, couldn't figure out how to get a job. I was juggling that whole thing of you get daycare and then get a job. You know, it's exorbitantly expensive. How many hours do I want to work? I did have a baby. I might like to see him once in a while.
Right. I know. It's hard.
So my husband and I made the financial decision that I would do that tradition. I was 34. Never thought that would be me. I always said I would never be a stay-at-home mom in the suburbs. Yeah. And,
never say those things.
Never say never. I know. So we were living in Cambridge, so I technically wasn't in the suburbs, but I was that stay-home mom. I had another baby. And then when my daughter was 2, I decided it was time that I wanted to get back into the professional world and did all those things. I say I'm basically a professional relauncher.
Okay.
I keep relaunching my career. So I go back. And there's a whole army of women like me. That's the thing about this. We all went and got our education. I'm 54. And
yeah, I can relate.
Yeah, it's hard to have children. They're a lot of work.
Yeah, and no one really tells you that it's like you're in it for the whole thing. It's not like you can just put it down and walk back into your life.
And you don't even know if you're doing a good job. That's the hard part.
Oh, man, yeah.
Anyway, so, I was in and out of work. I was a family law attorney. I used to say I was terrible at it. I actually got fired.
Wow.
That was and then it was sort of at the end of like a long series of bad things happening, basically the worst of which my husband and I both went to work one day and left the kids at home. And every time I tell that story, people are like, oh yeah, we did that, or I did that, or
you mean you forgot to?
I left for work. My husband left for work.
That's a classic story.
They were babies. They were 7 and 9, but they were sort of confused. They're like, where is everybody?
Oh my gosh.
So that was sort of a turning point in my career when I was like, well, I kind of have to take care of them. So that was sort of like the fallback, and then I ended up getting fired. And then I just got to be that mom, the one who got really involved. I got so involved, I ran for school committee twice. And I have a good story for that too. I had a 11-year-old boy who was my campaign manager. I was actually a pretty good candidate, but Cambridge politics are hard.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. So that didn't work out. And then I've been kind of in and out. I was doing some writing. I'm an overeducated woman. And the hard part about getting a job when you have a law degree or another advanced degree and you don't want to be that anymore is you can't take it off your resume because it looks like you didn't work, right?
Right.
And then you apply for other jobs and they can't understand why you'd want them.
I get that.
Yeah. So, and I ended up getting a friend of mine, her dad had the housing relocation company. I have a background in affordable housing development.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
I was doing some project management. I used to call it was like a board game, basically. We were moving residents in and out of their units while their units got renovated and then working to get them back in. It was just a lot of, it was a good
details.
project. Details. I'm good with that. And that's what I'm good at. I create order out of chaos. That's my greatest skill.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. I'm the opposite. I create chaos and I have other people help me create order.
There you go. We need the yin and yang of life.
Yeah.
So anyway, so then I was a contract position, then there's a change in management, and this is 2016. Mm-hmm. And I realized they were going to outsource me, that I was going to lose that job, and I was very upset.
Yeah.
Sort of simultaneously, 2016, my husband and I went to Denver, and we did a great tour, a legal tour with a woman named Goldie Solidar from City Sessions, who took us on a private tour of the cannabis industry, and it blew my mind. I had no idea. We went to a dispensary. We went to a grow facility. Just how normal it was, because it was not normal here in any way, shape, and form in 2016.
No.
So that sort of opened my eyes. Then 2017, I lost my job. Mm-hmm. I was having a really hard time getting another job. I went into career therapy.
Wow.
It wasn't my fault. It was just, structural. That, it wasn't just me. It was personal.
Right.
And then kind of had this idea. I'm like, well, cannabis is new. Like, how often do you get to be part of something new, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm a lawyer. I started learning the regs. I started going to meetings. I went to like Women Who Grow and Elevate. And just the first time I heard the endocannabinoids system, I thought someone was lying.
Really?
So all the things I didn't know, I learned the history. I have no idea. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But, cannabis can make you one.
Yes, it can.
And in 2018, I still didn't know where I'd fit in. Like, I realized that all the law firms in Boston now have cannabis divisions, but I wasn't quite up to speed on it yet. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel, but that's also a woman thing. Like, we feel like we have to be perfect before we jump in.
Yeah.
Whatever. That's a whole other show. We were talking about having more content. So my show literally came out of me and a friend talking about how do you talk to your kids about cannabis.
Okay.
My children are 18 and 21 now. They're a little bit younger. Yeah. So they're about 17, 20 when we were talking about it. Her kids were younger, like 9, 11, 13 something. Mm-hmm. And that was the first show, and I thought we were going to do it as a co-host sort of situation.
Okay.
but there's this funny divide in the cannabis world between CBD and cannabis.
Yeah, I'm learning that.
Yeah. So she's testing products. She didn't really want to be connected to cannabis. And so this sort of ended up being my show. And it just really started with me finding friends on the street, like, honest to God. I'd be walking around Cambridge.
I hear ya.
I'd be like,
will you be on my podcast?
Yeah. Like, I have a friend who wrote a book about the Beatles, and she was like, oh, yeah, they were into cannabis. I'm like, oh, come on.
That's great.
That's how it started. And I just, I've been doing, I'm sure what you're doing. I do a lot of networking. I go to a lot of events. We were at NECAN, and so Amy, who hasn't talked yet, is really working on my social media campaign. Canna Moms across the world, literally.
Yeah.
So it's sort of flourishing. People are reaching out to me, and now I have, so basically the goal is a show a week, which we're scheduled out. I have guests lined up through the December.
Nice.
I think this is a bottomless pit of discussion. I say it covers everything from cosmetics to criminal justice to climate change. I have a woman coming on who's going to have a special we're going to do once a month on climate change and cannabis.
Really? That's great.
I just, these are interesting stories that need to be heard. We're in we're in an anomaly in history. This is 100 years of weirdness. So anyway, so that's sort of my story is sort of backwards. I am a natural fighter. I say that I'm an attorney. They teach us to fight. I'm an advocate. I see this as this sort of amazing world. My mother is still a little concerned about me.
Yep, mine is too.
I have normalized it. I will say I've normalized it in my house. When we came home in 2016, when my husband and I came home from Denver, my son was 16, I think. And we sat him down and said, okay, everything we knew was wrong. Like seriously wrong. And we're going to talk about this in a new way. And I've normalized it. And, this is true. I'm Jewish, and at Rosh Hashanah, we hosted, 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. We had a bar, and we had a cannabis bar.
Oh, beautiful.
That is beautiful. Nobody could sue, but it was there. So it was like, this is just part of my life now. And I always say, I don't have tattoos. I wear pearls. I play tennis. This is not my normal habitat, but I am so amazed and excited to be part of something new like this.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
That's my story.
That's a great.
And I read your article on LinkedIn. I was like moved to tears. Even though I didn't have the same experience, kind of a similar, being really like all of a sudden my eyes are opened and I do not feel ashamed or guilty about something that's helping me, and I am not going to be quiet. So
yeah, not going to be quiet. Yeah, I believe that's a good motto. Maybe those will be t-shirts.
I'm writing it down.
Oh, jeez. Oh, wow. So, yeah, great story. Now, Amy, do you want to tell me your story as well? I'd love to hear that.
And just so you know, Amy and I have known each other. Amy was my younger brother's college girlfriend. That's
okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So that's a nice connection.
It is a great connection.
She's my Canna sister.
That's right. Cannabis.
Cannabis. Yeah.
I mean, my story's not as extensive and interesting as Joyce's. I've just always loved weed. From the first time that I smoked it, from the first toke back in high school, in the early 80s.
Yep.
And yeah, I've just been smoking it on and off. There have been periods where I've taken big breaks and then I've jumped back on and then taken more breaks. But it just really helps getting through life and the day. It helps me to enjoy the moment.
Exactly.
Stay positive, stay present.
Agreed.
And yeah, just that alone. I feel like I am a better mom.
Oh yeah, that's
hands down.
That's a big discussion we have. Is the mom thing.
Oh my God.
Oh, I don't know how I would have. It's really kind of allowed me to hold still long enough to enjoy the moment, but also process stuff.
Exactly.
I don't know if that it does that for you guys, but it's been a huge tool. Like just.
Oh my God. But I always say that we weren't. I grew up. We were the wine generation. Every mom we would encourage to drink, right?
Yep.
But yeah. And the idea of me like coming home and having a joint was pretty much off the chart. It wasn't even like recognizable as a choice. And now I talk to young mothers and I think about, and I was very stressed out. I had a very stressful job. My son was not easy.
Well, I don't know of any of them that are really.
Yeah. But the idea that I could have been, it's hard to be a parent because you're learning with them, right? So
Yeah.
the idea that you have to live in their world and you have to be able to accept their world is very hard.
Yeah. It kind of freaked me out.
Yeah, I agree.
I was like, I remember clear as day taking him home from the hospital and being like, I have to keep this thing alive? Are you kidding me? No one told me.
I know. Yeah, my husband, that first night we were lying there going, I think we might have made a mistake. Oh my God.
Stop it.
But he's turning 21 next week, so we've done a good job.
Yeah.
Your kids are great.
Oh
my God. They're amazing. But, so when Brendan was, my son was 2 and a half.
11 now.
He's 12 now.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh, wow.
And I hadn't been smoking. That was one of my periods where I'd taken a big break.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I heard the diagnosis, I mean, literally the first thing I thought about was, oh, I'm smoking weed for the entire time. I mean, and I did. Mm-hmm. And I smoked it the entire time and I got through it, surgeries, chemo, hair loss, feeling like an alien for years. And then even sort of the PTSD afterwards where you're done with your treatments and it's like, now what? I've just been put through the ringer for years. I had to stop working. I had to have people help me.
How do you go back?
And now what? It was just so bizarre. It's just really.
Yeah.
But anyway, weed helped my attitude. I had good weeks, bad weeks, and the weed helped me through it all, hands down.
And the idea that I've known Amie forever, and I've seen this. This is not my natural habitat. I keep saying that I was a cannabis user, but I wasn't my identity. And saw how. I mean, I've known Amie forever, so I've seen how people sort of demonized it on her for so many years.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And the idea that she's in this world now, when she decided, she sort of stepped up and said she wanted to work with me on this was so exciting because we do come from this from two very different perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how were you demonized with the weed?
Well, I will just say now that everyone is 100% supportive. I just want to say that everyone's supportive.
But we have that information, so we were basing our judgment.
Of course.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I'm amongst them. We didn't know. I mean, how did we know? Everything I was told was you had a joint, you went to jail.
Right.
You were killing brain cells.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. That if you use cannabis, you were lazy and irresponsible, and which I've learned is literally the opposite is true.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And that the idea that you could be a respectable member of society and use this substance that for very bad reasons is not just illegal, but criminalized in a way that has damaged generations.
I know.
Yes. Yeah. So this is
with no evidence.
With no evidence.
No studies.
So, it feels like a big fight and it's very hard, it's hard to change people's minds. And
it is.
We just have to keep telling these stories over and over again so it does become normalized and that the false, again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but every corner of the story is just frustrating.
Yes, it is. I feel that. I feel like just even simple thing like I was trying to do a promo on Facebook and they kept blocking it and I just kept going at them with, I'm doing this, kind of like made it about safety and whatnot, but just here's something it can save lives. And for me, I'm just really passionate about the number of pharmaceuticals that, my kids are on, everybody seems to be on. And and that we're being shamed for wanting to help ourselves. I went to my internal medicine doctor and for the first time, I put medical cannabis I take a thyroid med and, a low dose of something else, which I'd like to get off. But anyway, so that was the first time I put it on there. The year before, I told the nurse when I was getting, she was screening me. I'm like, I use cannabis. She's like, well, don't put it on there. Don't put it on there. And this time I'm like, I'm putting it on there. I talked to Mike Robinson, who's this phenomenal advocate. And he's like, be as proactive or empower yourself, put it on there. They need to know their patients are using this successfully. And so I did. And she was like not supportive.
I've heard that over and over again. I know.
And I know it's not like she is a bad doctor, or there's just so many unknowns, and I can see it's so risky, and they have this liability. So how do you change the dynamic? And I think what you ladies are doing is fabulous. So my hat's off to you. And just, I think that getting people's stories about how they've been successful, transformed.
And I think that because we're in the industry, my mother always says, an awful lot about pot. I'm like, well, I think about it every day. So it's very normalized to us. I kind of forget that people don't know these stories. Even like being out of Massachusetts, my daughter's in Arizona, at the University of Arizona, and her new friend I forget the whole story. She's doing a paper, and she needed to interview somebody who was in a talking profession. So my daughter told her what I do for a living, which apparently blew her mind. And
oh yeah,
she called me and she interviewed me for her paper. And again, even like just relaying this information to the next generation.
Yes.
She's spoken to me, and their generation, they will not have any of the same issues that we have. Obviously,
Not at all.
No. Thankfully. And I forget that it's.
Yeah. You have to remember that they almost forget. Like even Amy, we had the last show, Amy was talking about how you talk to your kids who may not know that you're using cannabis. So, and the idea that it comes from a place of shame and fear because of what we were taught. I mean, that's a thing that we are getting over ourselves, but our kids aren't getting over. But they need to be explained why we feel this way because they just don't know.
Right. And I actually just told my son just last week.
Yeah.
I said, because the podcast is coming out. I don't think it's public, right? He needs to know.
Right.
And I said, son, there's something I need to tell you.
It's the conversation.
I said, that smell, sometimes I smell, and he's like, yeah. And I said, well, I use cannabis. It's medicine. I had I had breast cancer. And I started talking about it. He's like, yeah, Mom, whatever. Get out of my room.
So like you have this whole build up and he's like,
whatever.
That's great, Mom.
Move it along, Mom.
Which means, they're secure. They're not concerned.
Boring.
Yeah, boring.
Yeah, I think my kids have pretty much been the same way. I've kept it about, I've said it's my medicine, and I've kind of said a little bit, it's misunderstood a lot, and you've got to be careful. And yes, people misuse it and tried to be like walking that middle line. But, when I go to the dispensary and they're in the car or whatnot, I just have tried to be as open and honest about it as possible and make it.
He does not want to hear about it. He literally, his eyes glaze over if I mention it. So,
which is good. That's the best part.
Yeah.
If you're hiding it or you're being weird about it, they get really curious.
Couldn't care less. But he's excited that I'm going to be doing the podcast.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. So, that kind of segues, and you both can talk about like what have you personally faced, it sounds like you've got a really supportive community, but getting to that point, and even, as you have done this podcast, have you had any stigma, backlash?
For the most part, no.
No? Okay.
People still, the older generation will sometimes laugh when I tell them what I'm doing. I was at a Shiva, a funeral, I don't know, maybe a month ago with, my mom was there. And she always, when people ask me what I'm doing and she's standing next to me, she always does give me that kind of funny look.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Everybody, well, the truth is everybody has a cannabis story, Even I'm very active in my temple, and in our sisterhood, I'm having a doctor come in and we're going to do a talk on cannabis for our like Friday night Shabbat pre-service.
Oh, that's great.
These are older women, a little bit older than me, and we are the fastest growing population of users. And I heard your other interview with the Canna Mom, the nurse.
Yeah, Jessie.
Right. Jessie, these products are tricky because they aren't regulated enough. And if you start making products that aren't good, you think it doesn't work.
Right.
And that's the unfortunate part. So, it's education, which seems sort of boring, but just getting the message out consistently. I think that's what we're hoping to do. And, getting out in a mature way. I like to say I'm the Terry Gross of cannabis.
I love that.
Okay. Terry Gross. Love her.
Yeah. We're not consuming. We're not joking. We know we're talking about serious stories. Yeah.
And someone called us the Click and Clack.
Oh, yeah. Cannabis.
Did they? Oh, that's good. That's like people are listening.
But, again, it needs to be educational and accessible, and it's hard to shift people's belief system.
And positive.
It really is. And, like that mentality of it and I find myself I'm baked or I'm a stoner, that kind of stuff. I try to like change that language.
I do too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't like the stoner language.
Yeah, every now and then I do it, but yeah, I kind of, because then it just feeds into that kind of mentality.
The negative stigma.
Negative
stigma.
For the most part,
people have been very positive, and
that's good.
There is some education around like the endocannabinoid system. My friends still want to equate alcohol and opiates with cannabis, which frustrates me.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do a little bit of that education.
Yeah, the addiction industry has been frustrating for me personally because I went through AA 12-step.
Oh, all right. So yeah.
And it was helpful for me at the time, and I don't want to bash it, but when I started using cannabis, I felt like if I went back to like that support group, I would kind of be looked at as kind of a second-class citizen if I, and I just didn't feel like, I felt like I would go back and say, well, I'm actually using this and it's helping me. And yeah. So anyways.
And it's a personalization, which you also talked about on the other show. Just, this is so uniquely personal.
It is. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It is. And it ties into people's like issues and whatnot,
And just like in the way that, so I was actually in New York. I was in New York last weekend. I was at a nice CBD store called Artemis, and they had some good CBD products, but they also had this functional, cute little book about, how you keep track of how you're feeling each day. Cause I think that's what I hear from medical people in this industry. You need to be really conscious of how you experience each dosage.
Yes. And more data and like journal, that's a really good suggestion.
Yeah. The log. So I think that's something that people should really be, your other nurse is saying the same thing, that we're so used to like, give me 2 pills and fix the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that probably isn't correct either, but we're just used to it. But, this is very personalized and people need agency.
It calls for a very individualized approach.
Yeah.
Because there's so much unknown about the cannabinoids still that it's hard to extrapolate. Well, that's true. I mean, even with pharmaceuticals, I think that's half the problem is they've been prescribed to a male that weighs a certain amount, and there's really no way to alter a dose once it's in your system.
Right. But, and the liver metastasizing issues. There's I'd say I'm a generalist, but I keep hearing similar stories over and over again.
Really?
But, that's a big one. Interactions with other medications. And
yes. What about the CBD? Now, you mentioned earlier the divide between CBD, and talk a little bit about that.
I don't know if it's real or not, but we're in this world where we're allowed to, isolates are a big thing.
Right.
I keep hearing it's not the best thing from people who actually understand how it works.
I hear both sides. I've heard like, okay, well, if we get isolates and they go through this pharmaceutical rigorous process, then we'll be able to help more people, but we're sacrificing then from the other side, are we sacrificing all the, by doing that to this plant too soon before we understand it, we're sacrificing much more potential. And
yes, I think that's the argument. But the bigger issue is that it's so unregulated.
Yeah.
People are popping gummies that you hear they're popping gummies they get at the gas station. Never, people, anyone who's listening, do not buy anything CBD at the gas station. Nothing but gas at the gas station.
Yeah. Gosh.
All right, don't get your CBD.
Don't get your medicine at the gas station, people.
Yeah, because it's putting it in, with like.
There's so much quality product out there.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I understand there's a divide. I am not a medical professional in any way, shape, or form. I don't really know what the truth is, but it seems to be that the entourage effect and the idea that this natural plant works better in combination with other things seems to be the truth of it. But, let's see what happens in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I feel that very similarly that the whole plant needs to be looked at. And, when I'm talking to these people in Oregon and places where they're so far ahead and they've figured out.
Light years ahead.
I know, like how to do it all at home. Because one thing that's been frustrating for me is affordability with thinking about doing it with my kids. And, I think growing myself would be the best option, but there's all these like learning curves, to do that. So I don't know. Do you guys have any idea?
Like on top of like raising your 5 kids, making your own medicine.
Right. Well, come on. I feel like it was.
I don't know. I'm sure you could do it, but that's what they expect of us, super women. They're like, yeah, just do it all. You're fine.
Exactly. And I made people believe that I'm really capable and good at it, and I've kind of locked myself in, and it's craziness.
Well, I'm using a CBD cream every day on my feet.
Yeah. Okay.
And, we'll see. I like it helps, and I got my mama cream. She's on board. She's using it. I got her a really nice jar from Healing Rose.
Yeah, I mean, I have a CBD balm that I use all the time. That's true.
I have a CBD lip balm that I love.
But again, in terms of tinctures I
have a tincture. I have tinctures.
Who knows? We'll know.
I have it all.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Yeah, and what would you recommend to like someone around, our age that wants to get into trying marijuana? Do you recommend to go get your card, or what do you guys have thoughts on that?
I mean, it seems it's pretty easy to get your card.
I know.
We have limited rec dispensaries. I live in Cambridge. We may never get a rec dispensary.
Yeah, what happened there?
You will know.
Because I was going to ask you what your thoughts on Massachusetts in terms of cannabis industry. And
so, I think we have an interesting model here. I have been talking to a lot of ladies on the West Coast and Colorado, and each state is very different. I like that we have local control, and the state cannabis commission seems to be pretty fluid. They seem to be doing what they're supposed to do. The logjams seem to be coming at the local level with those host community agreements.
Okay. That makes sense.
I've been to a couple of different cannabis legal seminars and events, and they're just kind of waiting to sue on that law, I think, because the host agreements aren't being regulated by the Cannabis Commission.
Okay.
Each town gets to make their own rules, basically, even though the law says 17% and 3% in tax, but everyone seems to be asking for more. And then this whole idea in Cambridge it almost flipped it. Like my hometown of Cambridge, we like to do everything different.
Huh.
So they couldn't just abide by the law and not try to extort people for their rec license. They decided to go the other extreme to engage more social equity, which I totally support.
Yep.
But the flip side is that now, while we're waiting for a social equity applicant to get up and ready to actually open a rec dispensary, well, maybe another year, 2 years, who knows how long. And so we just don't have a rec dispensary in Cambridge.
That's crazy. I mean,
and Somerville's similar. And, the people in Brookline are going crazy because there's 12-hour lines at Netta every day.
Really?
It's madness on that corner.
I don't know. I mean, I've been to municipal law meetings. I've watched, all these towns are very different. Like each town is really run differently, honest to God, in Massachusetts. And, a lot of these local, and I'm a politician too. I run for a local seat, so I kind of get this.
Okay.
A lot of our local politicians are just older white men in these communities, and they don't know what this is. They are still afraid of it. They're making all sorts of kind of arbitrary rules because they don't understand what it is. I mean, I keep thinking someone like me has a role to play in this at some level because I do understand municipal law and could go in and talk.
Oh, yeah.
And I look normal. I think that's the thing with people is I look very accessible. I am a small white woman, I have no tattoos. I have no piercings.
You can play the role.
I speak well. I get a seat at the table simply because I have a law degree, and it allows them to maybe hear this story without being sort of put off by the way, a lot of people in this industry they're chill. They have a different look. They have a different vibe.
And that's great.
But it's hard for people it's like the country. It's hard for people on the other side to hear it.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what's happening in Massachusetts. There's a lot of local issues, but it seems like from these municipal meetings I've been to, regardless if it's a city councilor in Framingham or the Western Massachusetts setup, like once the industries finally get into the town, everybody's very happy.
Oh, that's good to hear.
But it's getting over that burden of when this first came through, there were towns that put moratoriums. They said there was no way they were ever going to let any kind of cannabis industry into their towns.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember watching it and just thinking, oh, my goodness, come on. It's just got to be like everything has to be a battle. If you finally get it legalized and then, it takes years before anything's open and jeez.
And the other flip part of this, it is a very, very hard industry to be in. We have banking issues, financing issues. It's hard to get, the way the medical marijuana was set up was vertical so that, all the players are big money people because you couldn't get into this if you didn't have money behind you.
Yep.
And they all obviously want to have their rec license. That was, I'm sure, part of every single person's business model. So it's, to kind of like flip it. And the social equity is hard because these are always smaller businesses without financing who, even in the business side, you can't even deduct business expenses. People don't really understand how complicated it is to be in a federally illegal industry.
It's just such a mind bender.
Anyway, so that's the business part of it. And it's an interesting thing to watch. And people in cannabis are brave. I mean, that's all I'm going to say, because you gotta be really motivated to stay in this because it's so hard. Even little things like trying to open up a bank account. I mean, we don't touch the product. We don't produce. We talk about cannabis. We talk about it, right?
Right.
We had the same thing with Facebook. We were interviewing a pediatrician who works with cannabis, and it was a live stream. They took it down.
Oh my goodness.
And then we were trying to get a bank account, and I had to go to several different banks. They're worried about where we're getting our money from, I think. Because and I've been very transparent. I've been transparent the whole way along. I always say that we're in cannabis. A lot of industries, especially in CBD, you're setting up your business under a different name and you're doing business as the cannabis industry, which makes it easier to get a bank account. To change it, you have to be transparent. So as an attorney, I feel like it's a First Amendment issue.
Seriously.
It seems absurd.
It's absurd. Yeah, it's absurd.
But again, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of misunderstanding, and people like you, all the podcasters, all these brave women who are out there doing this work, it's a march. Keep moving forward.
Right. Yeah, you guys are brave, really.
I know we're brave. We're having fun.
Lots of fun. Anything you want to talk about your show and how do you promote it?
The media?
Well, it's a work in progress. I just started taking it over. So we're working on a new website. We're working on new everything. But we are at the Canna Mom Show on Instagram.
Okay.
We have a Facebook page. So
and we're on WeTube.
And we're on WeTube, YouTube.
And then anywhere you can get your...
We're on Stitcher for the podcast. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Where else are we? We're Spotify.
I was looking at like some of the guests that you interviewed. Who do you have coming up?
Oh, coming up. Oh, great. Actually, Thursday, we release our shows every Thursday.
You do one a week.
We do one a week. This week's release is a woman from Brooklyn, New York. Jenny's Baked at Home. She has a very great story. She went from a kids' modern furniture creator, I guess, business back in 2001. Kind of had one of those stories, things imploded, discovered cannabis after being ill. And now has this really great line of products. And she's working with, she's part of the Kentucky Hemp federal program.
Wow.
Our federal government. I know, right?
I don't know if I'd be so brave in that state.
So she's gone down there, so that's going to be her source. I say, cannabis is this weird Venn diagram thing. It actually does bring people together. I mean, Congress has actually passed the Farm Bill. They may actually pass the banking. So this is something, our dysfunctional Congress is actually working on.
That's good.
That's
good to hear.
That's our show next week. And then, I have this woman named Asia Atwood. She runs a company called Trella Technologies.
Okay.
It's a horizontal growth, I guess, equipment.
Yeah.
Okay.
She knows all about science.
Amazing.
And she's my guest. I'm talking to her this afternoon. So middle of November, we're going to do a special show, just her. I'm going to be talking about climate change and cannabis.
Nice.
We're going to interview this woman named tomorrow, Kate Morgan and Suzanne Wong, who have a new cannabis business. They're actually local ladies from Cambridge. And I met it's interesting. People refer, I met this green nurse named Mark Wister. It's all the networks,
Yeah, I'm finding that out.
He had called me he had seen me on like Instagram or something, had called me. It turns out he knows all these different women who are kind of getting into this industry. Women like me. I mean, a lot of the women in this industry look like me. It's easy to relate to them, and it's a fun network to be making.
It really is. I'm thrilled. I've been doing the podcast with really kind of intense subject matter for a long time, and kind of stepping into this cannabis segment has just been wonderful, I have to say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And actually the big exciting one is November 10th. I forgot about
that.
So November 10th, there is a cannabis wedding expo.
Really?
That's going to be fun.
At the Sheridan Commander in Cambridge.
Cannabis wedding. I'm going to write that down.
So there's a company out in Denver, Colorado, Erie Weddings, and I was connected to them through a previous guest who I had talked to about her cannabis wedding. She actually had a cannabis-friendly wedding. That was one of my guests.
Okay.
So these event planners, Amy and I spoke with them last week, and they're moving their business out to Boston. So we're going to we're going to interview them at the cannabis convention.
Oh, and on site.
At their booth. Yeah. Bring my camera guy with me to get some good photos. And this I talked to a lot of people about because they just had that same reaction. What? How could that be? I'm like, I know, it's like the real world, but everything's a little bit different. It touches everything: criminal justice, climate change,
Absolutely.
Cosmetics. It could change our country. It could change the earth. Even one of your guests was talking about hemp and cleaning the soil.
Oh, yes.
We use more hemp. We'd have more trees. Think of the implications of this.
It cuts across everything.
So every week we have a different subject, different women coming forward. I was going to interview Dave Rogers last week. He's the chairperson of the Joint Cannabis Policy Commission at the State House.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a good one.
We were actually there, set up. He was running late. We ended up not doing it. I'm going to try to do a phone in next week, but we were ready. I was excited to do it.
We did get to chit chat with him.
We did chit chat, and I know Dave. So I just think that's the policy part. To talk about how this is happening on a local level in terms of legislation.
Yeah, like putting this information out too, really in a factual way, so people can kind of have something to stand on as they gain awareness and acceptance.
And the idea that people are willing to talk about this. I had interviewed someone running for district attorney early on, and just the idea that someone running for district attorney would talk about cannabis positively is really it's the idea. When I was in law school 20 years ago, not even on the radar. Yeah. And now Rachel Rollins, who actually went to Northeastern with me, and she's the Suffolk district attorney. She's normalizing this, saying we're not going to prosecute these small charges anymore, and we have to, wipe out these transcripts of the records of people who are, caught up in this game. And, district attorneys have so much power.
Yeah.
In the criminal justice system. And this is going to be a huge shift when district attorneys across the country start thinking that way.
That'll be, it needs to happen. It's hard to, be lighthearted sometimes about it when so many people are still in jail for what we can, I don't take it for granted, I guess.
It's crazy. If you watch Live PD, every time someone gets pulled over, they're smoking, there's weed smell, and then they get arrested every single time.
And we don't even really know the effect. On driving, it's just this knee-jerk, the literature in the dispensary says if you use marijuana, don't drive. That's what it says. Now, how is that even acceptable? It's
not, because they're equating it with alcohol.
Right.
They just think it's in the same boat. Let's just lump it in.
And the idea that alcohol is not a medicine and cannabis is a medicine, and you can drive with Advil and you can drive with opiates.
Right.
Maybe you're not. I don't know. I'm sure there are other, but people are on all sorts of medications.
Anyway, that show wouldn't exist if cannabis was completely legal. They would have no show anymore.
Oh, I know. Well, this could be a whole nother line of conversation, but police, that's a big hurdle to get some less, fear-based tactic conversation. That's one thing I wanted to try to get a panel of a police officer, a doctor.
The police officer from Walpole who's on the cannabis task.
Really?
I can't think of his name. I've been trying to get him on the show, but he hasn't really responded.
Oh.
Again, so he's engaging in the other side of the conversation in a very productive way.
Excellent.
Fennell Lindsay is on that as well. She's another attorney from Northeastern that I know.
So bit by bit.
Bit by bit, and again, he comes from a law and order perspective. These are the laws. Mm-hmm. So we have to create the order. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to change the dynamics, you have to change the law. That's it's very clear cut to him, which is fair.
Yeah. Thank you, ladies.
Fair, Jill.
Seriously, I really enjoyed the connection, and I'll be in touch.
Yeah, well, we're going to be doing some Women for Cannabis Expo this week at the Hines, and we're going to some women's, the cannabisweek.com, and then we're going to be going to some Women Grow. It's a women's networking event on Wednesday night and talking about what we do. And again, this network, it's unbelievable.
It's a nice industry.
And the idea that we can take, again, like flipping it on the women's thing, we can take some of the qualities that people always said were bad for business, which are truly good for business, and infusing this new world with it and creating something that's different, even like setting up the podcast, making sure that, I don't know, trying to set up right the first time. And I know what it feels like. Every woman knows what it feels like to be dismissed or ignored or told you're not quite good. You know,
it's empowering.
It's empowering. And there's a whole slew younger women in this era. I just feel like this has got to be open pathways for those women who really want to be in this and are passionate and are going to really do good by it.
Bye-bye, Amy. Bye, Joyce.